All right, welcome everyone. Today we are diving into one of the biggest ideas in, well, all of science, the theory of evolution. I mean, it's really the story of where all of us and every single living thing actually came from.
You got it. It's totally foundational to biology, but at the same time, it might be one of the most misunderstood and, most debated ideas out there. So let's just get straight into it and unpack what the science really tells us.
It really all boils down to one simple, but, incredibly profound question. How did we get here? Seriously, just think about it. How did our planet become home to this unbelievable, almost bewildering variety of life? We're talking everything from the tiniest little bacterium to the gigantic blue whale.
Right, and the answer science gives us, it's a story that stretches back almost 4 billion years. It's this incredible story of a single common ancestor that just branched out over and over into the millions and millions of species we see today. It really is an epic tale of survival and change and just diversification. So in this explainer, that's exactly the story we're going to walk through together. My role is going to be laying out the scientific evidence, the stuff that really underpins the whole theory of evolution. And I'll be sort of voicing some of those common questions and challenges that pop up for people. Now, the goal here isn't to have a debate, not at all. It's really to understand the entire conversation that surrounds this monumental idea.
Okay, so where do we start? Well, the story of modern evolutionary theory really kicks off with this guy right here, Charles Darwin, and specifically his absolutely groundbreaking book from 1859, On the Origin of Species. In it, he introduced this core concept he called descent with modification. And the idea is pretty straightforward. Species change over time, they give rise to new species, and they all share a common ancestor.
But here's where Darwin's real genius shines through. He didn't just say that it happens, he described the how, the mechanism behind all this change. He called it natural selection. And honestly, it's a beautifully simple idea that you can break down into 4 parts. First off, you've got variation. Just look around. We're not all identical, right? Then comes competition. The simple fact is, more individuals are born than can possibly survive. And that leads to selection, where certain traits give an organism a little bit of an edge. And finally, the most important part, inheritance. Those successful winning traits, they get passed on to the next generation. And that's basically it. You let that simple process run for millions of years, and it builds the incredible, mind-boggling diversity of life we see.
Now this is super important. Darwin didn't just come up with a cool idea and call it a day. No, he gathered a mountain of evidence to back it up. And in the years since he lived, that mountain has just gotten exponentially bigger. We're not talking about just one single line of proof here. It's a convergence. All this data from a ton of different fields, and all of it is pointing to the very same conclusion.
So scientists usually group all this evidence into 4 main buckets. First, you've got the fossil record. Basically, life's history written right there in stone. Then there's homology, which shows us shared ancestry by looking at anatomy. Then, of course, DNA, our universal genetic code. And maybe the most surprising one, direct observation. We can literally watch evolution happening in real time. So let's dig into a couple of these, shall we?
Okay, let's start with the fossils. Meet Tiktaalik. This fossil is it's a perfect snapshot of a major evolutionary leap. At its core, it's a fish, right? But if you look closer, you see it has a flattened skull, the very beginnings of a neck, and, this is the coolest part, inside its fins you can see the bones of a primitive wrist. It is a beautiful moment frozen in time, the moment our ancestors started to walk out of the water.
And next up we have homology. That's just the study of shared structures. So check this out. A human arm, a cat's leg, a whale's flipper, a bat's wing. They all do wildly different things, right? But, and here's the crazy part, they are all built from the exact same set of bones. Now, if you were designing these from scratch, that would be a really inefficient way to do it. But from an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense. They all just inherited the same basic toolkit from a common ancestor and then tinkered with it for all these new purposes. Okay, Emma, that's a lot of really compelling evidence. But I think this is the point where a lot of people, and I'll include myself here, start to have some big questions about how it all really fits together. So let's kind of pivot for a minute and try to tackle some of the biggest and most common ones people have.
All right, first one up is a phrase you hear all the time. Well, evolution is just a theory. It makes it sound like it's just a guess, some hunch that hasn't really been proven yet. So how do scientists even respond to that?
Oh, that is a fantastic and absolutely crucial question, and it all comes down to a really common misunderstanding of what the word theory actually means when a scientist says it. See, in everyday conversation, a theory is, well, it's a guess, right? But in science, a theory is the complete opposite. It's a powerful, well-substantiated explanation for how the natural world works, something that's been confirmed over and over again through observation and experiment. Think about it. We have the theory of gravity, we have atomic theory, and we have the theory of evolution. These aren't just hunches, they're the cornerstones of our understanding.
You know, the geneticist Theodosius Dobzhansky put it perfectly with this famous quote, and it's not just a clever turn of phrase, it really gets to the heart of it. Evolution is the grand, unifying principle that makes sense of all of biology. It's what connects everything, from the incredible diversity of life to the deep similarities we see between organisms. Honestly, without it, biology would just be a big pile of disconnected facts.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense about the word theory. But what about the evidence itself? You hear people point to the fossil record and ask, okay, so where are all the missing links? The idea being that, if species gradually changed from one to another, we should be able to find a perfect, unbroken chain of fossils showing every single tiny step.
Right, and the key thing to get here is that becoming a fossil is an incredibly rare event. I mean, think about it. An animal has to die in exactly the right place, get buried super quickly, and then stay undisturbed for millions and millions of years. It's almost a miracle it happens at all. So we're never going to have a fossil of every single species that ever lived. But the transitional fossils we do find, like Tiktaalik that we just saw, or Archaeopteryx, which is this amazing link between reptiles and birds, they are unbelievably powerful. Why? Because they fit the predictions of evolution perfectly. They're not the missing links, they're the links we've actually found.
That makes sense. Okay, here's a different kind of question, one that's more about the mechanics of it. How can a random, sort of unguided process like natural selection create something so mind-blowingly complex, like an eye? But then, on the flip side, why are living things so often, well, kind of weirdly and inefficiently designed?
I absolutely love this question because, believe it or not, the so-called imperfections are actually some of the strongest evidence we have for evolution. You see, evolution isn't some perfect engineer starting with a blank sheet of paper. It's more like a tinkerer, having to make do with the parts it already has. And the classic example is the recurrent laryngeal nerve in a giraffe. So this nerve goes from the brain to the voice box. A direct route would be, a few inches? But because it was inherited from our fish-like ancestors, where it looped around a blood vessel down by the heart, in a giraffe, that nerve travels all the way down its gigantic neck, loops around an artery, and goes all the way back up. It's a 15-foot detour. No intelligent engineer would ever design something like that, but it's a crystal-clear stamp of its evolutionary history.
And you know what? This isn't all just ancient history locked away in fossils. In fact, some of the most powerful, undeniable evidence for evolution is happening right now, right in front of us.
A really stark and, frankly, pretty urgent example is antibiotic resistance. Think about it. When you treat a bacterial infection with an antibiotic, most of the bacteria die off. But because of random variation, a few of them might just happen to have a mutation that makes them resistant. So what happens? They survive, they multiply, and before you know it, you've got a whole new population of superbugs that the drug can't even touch. This is literally natural selection happening in a petri dish, and it's a massive public health crisis that is being driven by evolution.
Or take the classic example of the peppered moth in England. So before the Industrial Revolution, most of these moths were light-colored, which was great camouflage on the lichen-covered trees. But then, all this soot from factories blackened the tree trunks. Suddenly, the rare dark-colored moths had the advantage against birds, and boom, their numbers just exploded. Now, fast forward to today. With cleaner air acts, the trees are light again, and guess what? The light-colored moth is making a huge comeback. It's just a perfect observable case of natural selection in action, responding directly to a changing environment.
Those real-time examples are really powerful. And that brings us to a final, maybe more social question. If the scientific evidence is really this extensive, why is evolution still so controversial in some parts of the world?
That really is the critical question, isn't it? And the first thing we have to establish is that this controversy, it's not happening among scientists. I mean, polls consistently show that something like 97% of scientists accept the theory of evolution. The debate isn't about whether the science is valid. It's a social, a religious, and a philosophical debate.
Yeah, the whole debate often gets framed as science versus religion, but that's a huge oversimplification. The theologian Ian Barber actually proposed that there are at least 4 different ways to think about the two. Some people only see conflict, that they're at war, but others see them as completely independent, like they're asking different questions. Science asks how and religion asks why. Still others see a path for dialogue where they can learn from each other, or even integration, where faith and science can be seen as totally compatible ways of understanding reality. And in fact, many mainstream religions have officially stated that evolution is perfectly compatible with their faith.
So when you boil it all down, the theory of evolution offers us this profound story about where we come from, connecting us to every single living thing on this planet.
Exactly. It shows us that life isn't static. It's constantly changing, adapting, and responding to the world around it. And understanding that story, both the incredible evidence and the tough questions it raises, is a really crucial part of understanding ourselves. So the question we want to leave you with is this: if evolution explains our past, what does it ask of our future?